Hi. So we're at module 2. We made it through module 1. So this is the module where we're talking about developing antecedent systems in the classroom. And one of the things that I always like to talk about is when you're developing antecedent systems, that's your opportunity to, one, do a lot of teaching, a lot of reteaching, a lot of teaching of replacement behaviors, teaching of coping systems, and also with antecedent systems, you get to catch about 80% of the issues that are going to happen in your classroom before they have a chance to happen. So good antecedent planning equals less behavior in general, also equals the teaching of replacement or coping skills. So I like to give an example of how this works in real life. I think if you looked at my bio, and all you see that I am right now an integrated preschool teacher. And one of the things that I did this year was I taught a behavior management class. I taught 2 classes over the course of the year for 20 staff in my building, people who were teachers, educational assistants, or specialists like music and Spanish. And what we did was we started looking at coming up with a behavior we wanted to change. And so the behavior that we came up with was tattling. And I said, oh, okay, tattling, we operationally defined it. We defined what it was pretty easily. And then I said, all right, so now we need a replacement behavior. What's a replacement behavior for tattling? And then they were like, not tattling? And so as we went through and we sort of looked at what's the common function of tattling behavior, we came up with tattling is really attention-seeking behavior. It's positive attention-seeking behavior primarily because it's the student letting the teacher know, I'm doing a good job, I'm doing the right thing, and I want you to see that. There's also a little bit of escape motivation in that if I tell the teacher that this problem is happening, the teacher will make this problem go away and I will escape or avoid the uncomfortable ickiness of this social situation that's going on. And so what we came up with as a replacement behavior, because if we're going to take one tool out of a child's toolbox, we need to put in a better tool. And if we're thinking on an antecedent level, what we're thinking of is like what's language and what's a system that we can put in place where we predict this behavior is going to happen and then we make a plan to change it before it has the chance to erupt. So just about every classroom from preschool up until middle school and maybe beyond, they're dealing with some level, some measure of tattling behavior. And so what we came up with was the replacement behavior was going to be telling the teacher that they worked it out. And what we came up with was 2 snaps. And we came up with a visual, and every class could do it differently, and different grades did it differently. I can say what I did in preschool was I made a visual with 3 ways of working it out. So number 1 was, we take turns. Number 2, we ask if we can play with it, or we ask if we can play next to them. And then number 3 was something else. But we had a visual that went with all 3 of those replacement choices. We did some role play. What is tattling? What is not tattling? So if someone is hurt or someone is hurting you or is saying something that's mean in preschool, we don't consider that tattling. I want to know. As a teacher, I want to know if there are some things that are happening. And what we did was we came up with a signal. And we said, if you come to us as a teacher and you are tattling, we're going to do this. So we decided we're not giving any attention to this behavior. We're not giving any verbal attention to this behavior. We sort of analyzed that part of the function of this behavior, or part of the reason the behavior was happening, was to gain the attention of teachers. So we said we're going to get rid of that attention piece altogether. If you come to us with tattling, and that's a signal, work it out. And then different classrooms came up with what's the 3 ways that you're going to work it out. And we would watch, and the child would practice whatever tool they were going to use, whatever strategy, and then they came back to us. And they came back to us and they gave us the signal, which let us know they worked it out. Now that's a behavior that we want to reinforce. We want to give lots of attention to that behavior. And so we came up with a little song. I worked it out. I worked it out. I talked to my friends. I worked it out. I worked it out. I worked it out. And what we decided in preschool was that every time you worked it out, we would add a minute of recess, or we would add a minute of free choice. And so there was lots of working it out. And because we were able to be really clear about what that behavior looked like at the beginning of free choice, it was, fresh in their frontal lobe, so they knew the behavior that we were looking for. They knew how we were going to, or they learned quickly how we were going to respond to that behavior. And then they got the reinforcement, they got the social reinforcement, they got the attention reinforcement that they were looking for, but they got that reinforcement for showing that they knew how to negotiate, or they knew how to manage a difficult situation, as opposed to getting reinforcement for telling the teacher that someone else was doing something wrong. So that's just one example. But since we did that, like we do that routinely in preschool, it's also happening in kindergarten. It's also happening in first grade. Every classroom, every teacher sort of makes that idea their own. But everyone looked at tattling, and we said, let's operationally define it. What is it? What isn't it? And then we said, what are we going to do to replace it? And then we said, what is the system? And what's the language that we're going to use? And putting all of those pieces together, every single class that put this in place saw a drastic reduction in tattling. So this is a system that can be used for any number of behaviors. And as we're going through, as you start to think about your blog, think about your assignment, feel free to send some of those questions or some of those nuisance behaviors that you tend to see over and over again. One thing we know as teachers in the classroom is small behaviors added together over time can become big problems. So just the issue of tattling in and of itself, one person tattles, now 8 people tattle. Or the behavior was tattling, and now there's repercussions for the person who was tattling. And now you've got maybe throwing or yelling that's happening in the other side of the room when someone's saying, it's not me, it was them, I never did anything. These nuisance behaviors can really snowball into a way that it seems to become almost impossible to lead your classroom, because you're dealing with putting out these small fires. And having an antecedent system, language, practice, preview, that system really seems to curb a lot of those nuisance behaviors. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoy this module, and have a great day.